I got to do some fun things this week, and I'm really sorry you didn't get this experience because it is, quite frankly, the most satisfying experience I think I've had in my life at this point. Yet at the same time, very humbling. Getting in that machine, knowing that I could do some serious damage, which believe me, I can do some serious damage because I have no clue what I'm doing. And for that thing to go into the ground in the way that it went into the ground and then pull up dirt was like, oh, yes. I feel like a man. It was great. So anyway, super fun. Thanks for letting me get to do that on your behalf. One of the things that I want you to know is I want you to be a part of this process as much as we are. And I know you have a job, you have things going on in your life, and not everybody gets to do that. And so I know I get the opportunity to get to do a lot of things that you don't get to do. Nevertheless, I want you to feel a part of that process. And one of the best ways that you can do that, of course, I'm going to be giving announcements on all of those things throughout the months as we get closer and closer. But through the Connect card, you're going to see, if you pull out that Connect card as Josh did, and you take your phone out and you scan that QR code, it's going to take you to our e-bulletin. We talk about it every week. But listen, that is so important. If you want to know what's happening step by step, there's a great way to get some info right there. You can learn a ton of stuff about our church, what's happening in our church, but also about the project. And if you want more information specifically to that project, then it's there. The timeline, construction timeline's there. It also will give you a link just with a click of the button. It'll take you to the All-In website that'll show you all of the cool things that's happening too. So just make sure you're utilizing that so that you can stay informed. So help me help you. Is that cool? You can help me help you as we all stay informed on all of the cool things that are happening in our church. So excited, right? I've always wanted a Rocky moment, So I got my Rocky moment. I checked that box. I got to dig some dirt and get my Rocky moment all in one Monday morning, which was pretty cool. So exciting stuff. All right, hey, if you got a Bible, go ahead and meet me, Matthew 16. We're going to be in Matthew 16. So a handful of years ago, I was in a tough place, trying to navigate some hard things. And I had a really wise person ask me a question that changed my life. And I'm going to ask you the same question. That question was, well, Logan, what were your expectations? What were your expectations? What did you expect from this particular point in your life? What were your expectations? What I have learned is, quite frankly, our expectations are, to put it in a phrase, everything. It has so much to help us understand the way that we see life, the way that we experience life. I mean, I'm talking from your home life to spiritual life, family life, relationships in between, all of those things. Our expectations have a way of shaping all of those things. And over the years, I don't know if you found this to be true, but I know that I have found it to be true, is that when I set expectations and life or people or whatever it may be in that particular time don't meet my expectations, I can oftentimes feel discouraged, disappointed. You fill in the blank, right? But in times in life when my expectations are met, I find it to be pretty joyful and a pretty exciting time. I think, again, as I said a minute ago, expectations are everything in life. Our attitude toward life tends to rise and fall on the expectations that we have for any given or particular thing in our life. Now, the thing that I find to be really interesting when I read the Bible is that Jesus has a way of confronting and redirecting my expectations, right? In fact, every morning when I sit down to read God's word, I find that he confronts some kind of expectation that I have for myself, for others, right? Even of him, right? And he confronts that expectation, and then he has a way of redirecting it through his word, which is what Jesus does regularly throughout his life and ministry, especially with the disciples. He spends a lot of time confronting their expectations and then redirecting them. And in Matthew 16, you're going to see Jesus do this in a really interesting way. In Matthew 16, verse 15, Jesus asked the disciples a really good question that's going to give us a window into their expectations, okay? So Jesus asks the disciples, he says, "Who do you say that I am?" Right? This is right after he said, well, hey, what are people saying that I am? Who are people saying that I am? And then he asked the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And then Peter, of course, he's always the first to raise his hand in the group, right? Only he never raises his hand, he blurts out, you know that person. So Peter boldly replies, he says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." I think this is a turning point, not only for the disciples, but it's also a turning point in the life and ministry of Jesus, because this is the first time really that you see the disciples having a deep conviction that Jesus is who they believed him to be. They declared out loud, "Jesus, you are the Son of God. You are the Messiah." But there's a huge problem. The huge problem is that they have expectations for what the Messiah is and should be. And all of a sudden, what they're realizing is that Jesus may not be and may not meet their expectations. See, we've talked about this many different times before, so you know this, but just by way of reminder, the disciples expected the Messiah to be a political leader. They expected him to be a military general. They expected him to be a liberator who was going to rally an army to overthrow Rome, and that they were going to be a part of the inner circle of that army, right? That's what Peter's thinking here. He's ready to draw a sword. That's why in the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter's ready to fight. Why is he ready to fight? Because he believes that Jesus has come to overthrow Rome and then restore Israel's power. But then notice what happens when we get to verse 21, because this is really interesting. Jesus completely shatters their expectations. He says to them, he says, "I must go to Jerusalem. There I will suffer many things, and I will be killed." And then he goes on to say, "And then on the third day, I will be raised." Now, knowing their expectations, you can probably feel, I would imagine, the weight of the moment, right? I mean, think about it. Their expectations are that Jesus is going to overthrow Rome. It's certainly not that he is going to die by the hand of Rome, right? So expectations in many ways are completely shot. For them, Jesus is supposed to conquer all, not die. And yet here we are, the Messiah, whom they've declared to be their Messiah, their king, the Jewish Messiah, and their expectations are being shattered. And you get a window into the gravity of this because Peter grabs Jesus and pulls Jesus aside, and he asks Jesus, he begins to rebuke him. He doesn't really even ask him, he just rebukes him. Here's what Peter says to Jesus. He says, "Far be it from you, Lord. Far be it from you. This shall never happen to you." What's Peter thinking in his mind? I will make sure, Jesus, that this is never going to happen to you, right? He's living into his expectations. And then here's what Jesus responds back to Peter. By the way, this is maybe one of the most sobering texts in all of the New Testament. This is how Jesus responds to Peter. He says, "Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me." That means that he is a stumbling block, right? He says, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You," hear this is really important. "You are setting your mind on the things, you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Oh, man. Well, what is Jesus doing right here? Like if you were to lean in, what is Jesus doing here? Well, here's what he's doing. He's confronting misplaced expectations. Peter wanted something really, really good. Peter wanted a good thing. He wanted to see his Messiah overthrow Rome and establish peace. He wanted to see Jesus overthrow Rome, get rid of Jewish oppression, and ultimately reign and rule. Like that's a really, really good thing. But Peter missed God's bigger plan. He was so focused on one word that he missed an entire phrase. That though he go to Jerusalem to suffer and die, on the third day he will be raised. So Peter and the disciples are so focused in on what they want from Jesus that they miss altogether God's divine plan to resurrect his son and thereby offer salvation to the world. You ever been there? You ever been there in your life where, sometimes we become so focused on what's right in front of us, we become so narrow-minded to what's right here in front of us that we miss the bigger picture of what maybe God has for your life? You ever been in that place where maybe Jesus just shifts your expectations because you've expected something that maybe God doesn't have for you? There's this phrase that we've kind of coined. It's called navel gazing. Anybody know what navel gazing is? Y'all know what that is? Nobody knows what navel gazing is? Okay, well, I'm going to explain it for you. All right, here we go. Well, thanks for helping me out. All right, here's what it means. It means to be so self-absorbed or excessively focused on your own thoughts, feelings, or situation that we miss out on the bigger picture. So there you go. Now you know what navel gazing is. It's not as much fun as you thought it was, right? I was thinking about it this week and I thought, navel gazing is something like this, right? It's when I go for a walk in the evening and it's dusk, it's a beautiful evening, and I'm going for a walk and there I am on my phone doing one of these when there's a beautiful sunrise behind me. It's when I'm at the dinner table with my family, and instead of being present with them, which is the greater thing, which, by the way, I see every time I go in a restaurant, by the way, and it's all people. It's not just young people, okay? It's everybody. You walk into a restaurant, it's like, man, nobody knows how to have a conversation anymore, right? That's navel gazing. It's when we are so focused on our own thoughts, feelings, or situations that we miss out on the bigger picture. And as Christians, it is so easy for us to slip into a navel gazing position, right? Where we are focusing on us, our wants, our desires, our preferences, and even our convictions, right? Knowing that many of them are really good things. Right? That's the funny thing, right? We can even get so consumed with really, really good things that we miss out on the best thing, the bigger picture, right? We become so focused on things that are good, but from God's point of view, they are very, 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 very small in terms of his eternal economy, right? I think about it like this. It's like driving down the road and I'm focused in on the instruments in front of me on the dashboard rather than watching the road, right? Sure, those instruments offer me some tools that I need to be able to drive. It gives me the speed. It tells me whether or not my battery's good, tells me how much gas I have. All of those things are good and I need to be mindful of those things, but I should never take my eyes off of the road, because what happens when you take your eyes off the road? You end up in a ditch. When we as Christians fixate on us rather than on him and what he is doing, we ultimately will find ourselves in a ditch, even with really good things. Even with really, really good things. Here's the truth. The church, this gathering that we've been talking about in this series, We Are Church, the church is for us, but it is not about us. And when our expectations that when we show up that this gathering is about us, guess what happens? We end up in a ditch real fast. Because it wasn't designed to meet every whim and every need and every want and every desire of this many people in this room. Can you imagine what it would be like to have to meet everybody's expectations in this room? It's impossible. It can't happen. This gathering was not designed for us, but for him, right? It's about him. It's about his glory. And here's what I'll tell you. The church exists to glorify God by making disciples. And yes, you are a disciple, but it does not exist to make you happy. It exists to empower you to go and make more disciples and more disciples and more disciples. And so Jesus has this way of kind of shattering expectations, but then he also gives us new expectations, right? So when he takes something away, he also brings something forth, right? And here's what he brings forth in verse 24. Look there in Matthew 16. This is what Jesus says. If anyone would come after me, he says, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For who would ever save his life would lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake, there he will find it. You know, the disciples have a little bit of an advantage on us. And in some ways, we have an advantage on them. But the advantage that they have here when they're hearing these words is that the cross is not much of it's not a metaphor for them, right? This is a real thing, a part of their life. They had seen this. They had experienced the brutality of cross bearing. So when Jesus tells them this, their minds immediately go to this brutal way in which someone dies. I just think about it like this. Carrying someone's cross or carrying your cross meant that you were under total submission. Total submission. It was a picture of public humiliation. The criminal's last act on earth was to carry their own instrument of torture to their place of death. Think about that. So Jesus is telling them, hey, listen, if you want to follow me, then you're going to have to get over yourself. And that is really hard to do. In fact, it takes a lifetime for us to realize that life is not about us. And the more that life is about us, the more miserable we are. What Jesus is trying to help us see is that the way to life and peace is not about us, but it's about him. That we find life and peace when our life looks like bearing a cross, and that doesn't mean, well, I just have some hard relationships, so I guess I'm gonna have to bear the weight of the cross. Well, work was tough today. No, the cross that Jesus is talking about here is yourself. It's us. It's having to get rid of us so that Christ might live through us. But Christ can't live through us if we can't get over us. Right? That's what Jesus is trying to help us see, that it requires us to die. It's an expectation of surrender. It's an expectation of sacrifice, that in that surrender, he might be made known. Now, for some, this cross-bearing was literal. I mean, you look at the disciples, all of them, except for John, died for their faith, and even John truly was a martyr, died for his faith. But did you know that 4,500 to 5,000 people die because of their faith across the globe every single year? Did you know that? Every single year, 4,500 to 5,000 people die because they are a Christian. Now, for others, it's a bit figurative. So there's a literal side of this, but there's also a figurative side to this, right? That the Christian life is a daily, moment-by-moment choice to surrender to Jesus. Well, what am I surrendering to him? Well, here's what you're surrendering to him. You're surrendering your control over your life and over others, which is hard to do, right? Okay, God, I'm going to live open-handed with you. You're going to be in control over my life. Oh, and I'm going to stop trying to control everybody else's life. That's hard to do, especially for controlling people. And yet, that's what he's asking us to do. It's to relinquish our hunger for power and influence, to say, my influence, here it is, Lord. It's all for you. I no longer desire power and influence, but man, I just want to follow you, and whatever it is that you give me, I will take. And I will steward for your glory. It's to let go of our desire for the approval of man. People pleasers in the room, that's hard to do. That's hard to do. But it's to recognize that my approval comes from the Lord, not from man, not from what a man or woman thinks of me, right? It's the need to let go of comfort, right? Which is hard. We live in a very comfortable time in history that 200 years ago, just 200 years ago, which is not very long in the grand scheme of things, right? We live in a very comfortable time. And it's hard to let go of those comforts, and yet it's, okay, God, I'm gonna give up my comforts for you. Now, here's what happens. When you and I live for our control, power, influence, approval, and comfort, here's what's gonna happen in your life. Your soul is gonna rot away. It will rot away. But when you release them to Christ and say, hey, I'm gonna surrender these things to the Lord, guess what's gonna happen? You're gonna experience life and peace. There is so much peace in surrender. There is so much anxiety when we hold and say, no, God, I can't let go of that. Right? Tell me I'm wrong. It's true that when we say, Lord, I'm just gonna give it to you. Oh man, like I can even, right now, I feel my blood pressure just going, whew. When we say, Lord, I'm just gonna trust you. I'm gonna trust you with my life. I'm gonna trust you with my family. I'm gonna trust you with my work. I'm gonna trust you with my relationships. I'm gonna trust you with my church. I'm gonna trust you, Lord, because you are in control and you are for me and you are worthy of my worship, but you're also worthy of my trust. Worthy of my trust. So, speaking of life and peace, I want you to notice back at something else, right? When Jesus is rebuking Peter, here's what he says. I just want to highlight because it's really good. He says to Peter, you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but you are setting your mind on things of man. That is really, really important. Specifically the word mind. I want you to circle that word. You are setting your mind not on the things of God, but on the things of man. Here's why that's so crucial to understand. All throughout the Bible, when this word is used, it's used for mind and also, check this out, attitude. It's almost as like what we allow in our mind and what we think on is connected to our attitude. Isn't that helpful? Right, when we think about that, when he says that you are setting your mind, you're setting your attitude not on the things of God, but on the things of man. And Paul, he picks up on this language in chapter 8, verse 6 of Romans. He says to set the mind on the flesh. When we set our mind on the flesh, here's what he says, it is death. But to set the mind, to set our attitude on the spirit, you know what that is? Life and peace. Anybody want life and peace? Please tell me you want life and peace. Right, yes, we all want life and peace. Well, here's how you do that. Set your mind and your attitude on the things of God and not on the things of man. Philippians chapter 2, verse 5, Paul offers this command. He says, have this mind among you. So he's telling us, we need to have this mind, right? The mind of God, not the mind of man. Have this mind among yourselves. By the way, he also says, which is yours in Christ. So if you're a Christian, this is your attitude. This is your mind. Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. He's talking about Jesus. But he emptied himself, taking the form of hear this word, servant. Circle it. Being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death. As if that wasn't enough, Paul says, even death on a cross. Literally, Jesus, the Son of God, became a servant. That word means slave. For you. Is that not enough? He became a slave. Historically, slavery is the condition of being owned or controlled by another person. It's being stripped of freedom, rights, and self-determination. By choice, according to the Father's plan, he, Jesus, gave up his rights, his authority, his comfort at the right hand of the Father, all to obey his Father's will, even to death. Was that easy? I don't think so. I think the Garden of Gethsemane reminds us just how difficult it is to bear a cross. As he sits in the Garden of Gethsemane, sweating drops of blood, knowing that he is about to bear the weight of God's wrath on his shoulders, knowing that death was going to come through the most brutal, awful way that there is on this earth to die. Cross bearing is hard. It is hard work. It is anything but easy. And so you may be wondering, well, then why in the world would Jesus do that? Well, look at verse 10. Philippians 2. Here's why. So that, this is a purpose statement, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God and the Father. So here's the bigger truth. God sent Jesus to the earth to become a slave so that all might come to know and follow him. Come to know him in relationship and to live in obedience to him. That's why Jesus came to the earth. And therefore, it is now ours as his disciples, it is our daily choice to surrender ourselves as his servants, as his slaves. And as we do so, it takes the spotlight away from me and mine and onto him and his. Right? That's the bigger truth. Like, we can become so consumed with the things that we think are so important, and yet in light of eternity, while they're good, they really don't matter. Because what does matter is that there are thousands of people who are destined for a hell, and we are God's plan A. Do you see the bigger picture? Right? That's what's at stake. Right? So here, us as the church, we recognize that our role, all of our role, mine included, is that we are servants of this bigger picture to see that all generations come to know and follow Jesus. That's what we are about. That's why our mission is that all generations will come to know and follow Jesus, because that is the bigger picture. God desires that all generations will come to know and follow Jesus, and he has made the way through Jesus, and then he has given us the mission to proclaim his name from our neighborhood to the ends of the earth. And we do that as servants. Servants. It means that we have to adopt the attitude of a servant in all areas of our life, every one of them. And so when we think about it like this, when we think about control, I want you to ask this question. Do I insist on having everything my way in life? Do I insist on having everything my way? Or do I surrender outcomes to Jesus? There's a key thing to think about there. Am I trusting me, or am I trusting the Lord? Am I trusting Christ here, or am I trusting myself? When it comes to approval, am I living for the applause of people? Am I living for likes? Am I living for affirmation of man, or do I live to please the Lord? Am I living to please the Lord? When it comes to influence and power, right? Do I leverage the influence and the power or the authority that God has given to me for myself, or to be a blessing to other people? When I think of comfort, do I avoid sacrifice or do I embrace it for the sake of the gospel? Am I willing to let go of my comfort for the sake of someone else, for the sake of someone else hearing the good news? So just to run it back real quick, what did you expect? When you became a Christian, what was it that you were expecting? The disciples, in many ways, expected a throne and they got a cross. They wanted a crown without the cost. And yet Jesus has a way of shattering those expectations, reshaping them, and helping them see that life is more than a throne and certainly more than a crown. For life is found not by holding on to my life, but actually giving it away freely. So what about you? Do you expect comfort, convenience, control? Do you expect the cross? You know, the great paradox of the Christian faith and the gospel itself is, again, that as you try to save your life, you will lose it. That's what Jesus says. If you try to save your life, if you try to hold on to your life rather than living in surrender, you will lose your life. But losing your life for Christ's sake, he says, you will find it. You will find rest and peace in this life, but also into the next. And so here's my invitation to us as a church, right? When we think about all of this, right? As a church, we have to bear our cross for the sake of this community, for the sake of the globe, for the sake of the gospel. Right? We as a church, we have to say, you know what? I'm going to die. As a church, we are going to choose individually, but also corporately. We're going to die to our wants, our desires. We're going to die to the idea that this is about me, and we're going to live to the idea that this is about God and all generations coming to know and follow Jesus. And here's the reason why. The church, both big C and then also little c, right here, what we're doing right here. The church, the gathering, it's not a gathering of spectators, but of servants who live and work to see God's will come to fruition on this earth. We live and we work as servants to see all generations come to know and follow Jesus. That's what we have to be about, because that's what God is about.